Hello, welcome to Polyglot Principles. My name is Modja, and in this YouTube channel, I help you to learn a language like a genius by teaching you the principles of language learning, right? If you follow the principles, then you learn really fast in a way that other people would consider to be genius level. But really, you're just following the principles of language learning, right? So this is what I do on this channel. And today's video is about, well, how do I improve my accent? How to improve your accent? That's the question, right? How do I improve my accent? Or how to improve your accent? Well, so you've probably had this situation, you've probably experienced this where you've learned a language but people perhaps can barely understand you, or your pronunciation is so bad, or like maybe people can understand you but you just don't like your pronunciation, you don't like your accent, right? You're saying things in a way that's maybe not very refined, etc. Right? So the question is, well, how do you improve your accent, right? So, I mean, before we get into the details, I should ask, I have a question for you. I want to know what you think about this. When do you think you should work on your accent, right? Should you work on it at the very beginning, in the middle of at the very start of your language learning journey, at the very beginning, or at the very end? Please let me know in the comment section below. I'm really interested in knowing what you think. All right. So I mentioned that if you saw the caption on the video, it was saying that it's too late, right? If you're asking me now how to improve your accent, it's too late, especially if you're in intermediate or towards the later stages of learning your language, right? So I'm going to say it's too late and it's not too late, right? To actually improve your accent. And I'm going to go into, sounds like a paradox, but I'm going to explain that. So the first thing is, you'll have to stick till the end to know how you can improve your accent anyway. But let's first talk about why it's too late. Too late to improve your accent if you're intermediate or near advanced level, beyond the beginner level. For example, if you've started learning words and you're asking how to improve your accent, why I'm saying it's too late. The reason I'm saying it's too late is because it is not smart in my experience to wait till later to learn the accent, right? To learn to pronounce words correctly, to say things correctly. That should be done at the very beginning, right? The first thing you need to do in a language is to produce sound. Produce the sound correctly, right? So pronunciation first, accent first. Many people think in reverse. When I was in university, when I used to take some language classes, they never focused on the pronunciation at all. They tell us, oh yeah, you learn the pronunciation. The idea was first learn the grammar, the important stuff. Learn the grammar, learn the words, and then later on you'll work on your accent. But here's the problem, right? If I don't work on my accent at the very beginning, if I don't know how to pronounce words correctly at the very beginning, what's going to happen is that I'm going to learn a lot of words and pronounce them incorrectly. Now I've learned thousands of words incorrectly. It's going to be a pain in the neck, a pain in the ass to suddenly now try to pronounce them correctly. So this is kind of the folly. This is kind of the folly in learning pronunciation later. First you pronounce things terribly, and then after having done that for a while, now you're trying to pronounce things correctly. That's going to be hard because you've already internalized bad habits of pronunciation, right? So really, look, if you've already done it, then we have to kind of fix the situation. You know, it's kind of, we're already in hell. You know, let's see what we can do, right? This is why I'm saying it's too late. If right, there's still stuff we can do later in the language learning process, but it's much better. Why be in hell when you can be in heaven, right? Why not start from the very beginning, pronouncing the words correctly, right? So first we begin with pronunciation. And I really emphasize a lot on pronunciation. And here are some of the reasons. When you begin, here's how to put it, right? And I've said it in a previous video. The basis of language is sound. The basis of language is sound, right? The most important thing you need to learn in a language, first of all, is sound. Without sound, nothing else is possible, right? Imagine if you can't understand the sounds that the native speakers are producing. Then obviously, what's the point of trying to understand sentence structure? You don't even understand, you can't even pick up the sounds that are being made, right? So that's the first thing. before you can listen to, let's put it this way, before you can listen to a podcast in the language or understand the news, first you need to at least be able to pick out what sounds are being used. Until you've picked up the sounds, you're not going to understand the news, you're not going to be able to listen to anything that's being said. Understanding the sounds is fundamental, yes? Here's another reason why sound is fundamental. Pronunciation is fundamental. If you cannot produce the sounds of a language, right, how the heck are you going to produce a sentence in the language? It's not possible. How the heck are you going to produce words correctly that people can understand if you haven't learned how to pronounce things properly, right? So this is key, right? Is the sound, the pronunciation, mastery of the sound allows you to do everything else. It's the fundamentals, right? So if you've listened to some ideas from great performers in sports, you'd learn that they focus on the fundamentals. There are certain things that allow you to do everything else, and you want to learn those things first, okay? So for instance, let's say you're trying to play chess. You cannot play chess if you haven't learned the rules of the game. It's fundamental. First you learn the rules, then you play chess, okay? So there are certain fundamentals of the body, right? The body needs food, right? You cannot do anything else. You can't think of quantum physics. You can't think of the meaning of life unless the body is fully fed. You can do it for a while, but eventually you have to eat, right? Because if you spend, if you don't feed the body, there's no energy to think or do anything else. First you have to feed the body. First you have to give the body water, for instance, right? Another fundamental of the human body, before you can think about the meaning of life and worry about your future, first you need to breathe. If you can't breathe, you can't do anything else. This is what I'm talking about when I say, this is what I mean when I say the fundamentals. First of all, you have to solve the fundamental problems of the body before you can do anything else. Sound is a fundamental when it comes to language, right? First you learn the sound, and then everything else is possible, right? How well you'll be able to do in the language is very heavily dependent. How well you listen to others is heavily dependent on how well you understand the sounds that they're producing. How well you'll be able to speak is heavily dependent on the sounds that you're able to produce. So fundamental, please, I cannot emphasize this enough. Start with the fundamental. If you're already intermediate or advanced and you're asking how to improve your accent, it's really too late. You're thinking in reverse, all right? But that being said, now we're in hell. Okay, we're in hell. You made a mistake, okay? You're at the intermediate level, you're advanced, and you still can't pronounce things correctly. What do you do then, all right? Now, I'm not going to leave you hanging, right? There's still stuff you can do, right? So, here we proceed by the principle of, let's call it the principle of frequency, right? The principle of frequency and difficulty. So here's what I mean. Let's just call it the principle of frequency. I think it sounds better, all right? Here's a principle of frequency. Look at all the mistakes that you're making in pronunciation and find the biggest weakness, the biggest mistake, the most frequent weakness. If you eradicate your most frequent weakness, you'll experience a tremendous improvement, right? So whatever the language is, there's going to be sounds that you're not pronouncing well, right? I know, like when people learn English, sometimes they have difficulty with certain sounds, depending on where they come from. So for example, if you're a German speaker, you might have a hard time pronouncing the sound W, like water, right? Because in German, W's are pronounced as V's. Water instead of water, you know, like when a German writes what you'd say as a... Okay, maybe I've gotten myself slightly confused. The Germans have the sound V, but they don't have the sound W, right? Or at least they don't have it as much. So they tend to mispronounce a lot words that start with W, right? Instead of saying, instead of saying this is very good, Alright, I have gotten myself thoroughly confused now. Let's see if we can think up a better example, right, of pronunciation. So you could have many mistakes in pronunciation. Let's try in English. Okay, this is a simple one. there's many tribes, for example, in Africa, where when those people learn English, they have they have difficulty pronouncing the sh sound. So, if, for example, if instead of saying the word show, they'll say so. Instead of saying I'm going to show you, they'll say I'm going to saw you, right? So there's people who have difficulty with the sh sound, right? Now, it might be that you have many difficulties with English pronunciation. One of them might be, and then maybe you find that when you speak, your most common mistake is to pronounce sh as s, right? So what you do is, don't work on all of the words, that all of the sounds you can't pronounce. Find the biggest one. In this case, maybe it's sh, right? So you work on that weakness first. If you'll notice that once you get your most frequently mispronounced sound, once you get that right, your level in the language will just rise. In this case, if you learn how to pronounce sh, then suddenly you notice that your level in English has gone up and your accent has gotten better. All right? And you keep doing this until, look, you have an accent that you have a pronunciation that you like. But of course, there's a more subtler issue, right? So maybe your pronunciation is good. Native speakers are good with your pronunciation. They can understand it. But what you're really interested in doing is sounding like people from a particular region. Let's say you want to sound like an American, or you want to sound like a British person, right? You want to pick up the British accent, or you want to sound like a person from Paris, right? How do you do that? Okay, again, it's going to be the same thing, right? Slightly altered, but the same principle. The principle of most frequent weakness, right? I guess maybe just before we go to how to pick up a particular accent from a particular region, let me go a little deeper in the principle of most frequent weakness, most frequently made weakness. This principle. Okay. For example, when you start learning a language, your biggest weakness is that you don't know how to pronounce anything. It's the most frequent weakness because you're struggling to pronounce stuff, you're struggling to understand sound. If you do what I recommended and you actually learn how to pronounce sounds correctly, then you're going to experience a tremendous improvement. You're going to be able to identify what words the native speakers are using, and the native speakers immediately, I've experienced this so many times, the native speakers immediately are going to start complimenting you. They're going to be like, oh wow, you speak so well, wow, amazing, you're such a natural in the language. And the reason they're going to do that is because you've overcome one of the biggest weaknesses at the very beginning, which is sound, okay? And then when you start learning the language, at the very beginning, you may notice that for example, you might have the most frequently used tense in any language that I know is the most frequently used tense is the present tense. We spend a lot of time talking about things that happen in the present, right? Which means that if you're learning a language, your most frequently made weakness is, after you've learned the sound, is going to be saying things that are happening right now in the present moment, right? Talking about the present. Which means, since this is the most frequent weakness, right? Because this is the most frequently used tense and you don't know how to do it, right? So if you learn the present tense, for example, if you learn to express things in the present properly, you're going to notice a huge jump, right, in your ability to use the language. And people are going to be like, wow, you've really improved, right? And this is natural because you've overcome your biggest weakness. You've overcome your biggest obstacle. This principle applies at various levels of the language learning process. So when it comes to learning a foreign accent, you want to speak British English, you want to speak American English. Again, you're going to proceed by this principle of most frequently made weakness. In this case, it's going to be the most frequent sound that you don't pronounce, like, let's say, the British do, right? You'll identify, and let's say you want to learn American accent. That's easy, right? So, for example, it might be that your biggest weakness is that you're not able to pronounce the sound, right? So if you come from, let's say, Kenya or Uganda in Africa, you might have difficulty saying a word like bird. You'll say bad. The bad is flying, the bad. Right? This sound, bird, right? That's how the Americans speak, the bird. It's chirping, not chopping, it's chirping, right? So that sound, bird. You might discover that this is the sound, if you look at how you pronounce, people can understand what you're saying, but your biggest weakness is that you can't pronounce the sound the way the Americans do. So what you do is you look at the way Americans pronounce the sound and you practice that. If that is really the most frequent thing that you're mispronouncing, that you're not pronouncing like Americans, if you learn that sound, you'll also notice a huge improvement. This is why I said it was similar. And then you go to the next sound that you're having difficulty with, right? The thing that you're pronouncing so differently from the Americans. If you pronounce that sound, then again you'll notice a huge improvement. And you just keep going like that. And you might notice, and then you'll notice a huge improvement. But of course, like I was saying, if you had known at the start of the language that you want to sound like an American, then from the very beginning you could have learned how to pronounce words the American way. That way you don't have to wait until you've internalized the wrong pronunciation. I'm not saying that other pronunciations are wrong, but if your goal is to speak like an American, then any other pronunciation is wrong. The only right pronunciation is the American pronunciation. Then in that case you'd have to learn the American pronunciation from the beginning and not later, right? So I've been very detailed in this video. I really hope it's been valuable to you. Now if you like this video, very likely you like other videos that I make. So every Monday at 8 a.m. Central African time, I publish a video, a YouTube video in which I teach you the principles of how to learn a language like a genius. So if you want to get access to those videos, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification. Ding, ding, ding. There's an icon there. After you click the subscribe button, click on those two, and you'll be notified whenever I come out with a new video. Right? So I said every day I do it at 8 a.m. Central African time, but sometimes I may surprise you. Make a surprise video that you didn't expect much earlier than expected. Right? So, and you'll know immediately about that if you hit the subscribe button and you hit the bell notification, right? Otherwise, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye.